Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the November meeting of the Access Pacific chapter of AUG. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about a system that I created for auditing in an Access database, and I came up with a clever title of creating auditing in an Access database with 3 mouse clicks and a little VBA, which is pretty close to the actual truth. Before I do that, I just want to go over a couple of things. I keep an eye on the roadmap for where we are in terms of projects that Microsoft is working on. Right now, the only 2 there are related to large format monitors. Those have been delayed primarily due to security work that was put on the Access team earlier this year. It sort of delayed their other non-security work. Right now on AFO, or Access Forever, large monitors, okay. This is an excerpt that Carl took from the presentation the Microsoft team gave at his conference last month. It mentions their engineering priorities, and I just thought I would point this out. If you want to go and look at Access Forever, this is there, but basically it talks about their primary focus is issue fixes, security, and so on. The next 4 items are all related to large monitor support, and they're working at that as quickly, as expeditiously as they can. And they're also looking ahead to being able to work on Git integration for source code management at some time. And as everybody is probably guessing, this is an optimistic estimate, no doubt. This is one of the interesting tidbits that came out of that conference. I don't know if this impacts any of you, but I thought I would put it in here tonight. I know that Maria Barnes is working on an Access Forever article on this topic that should be out in a couple of days. But in the conference, Linda announced that the Trident engine, which is the engine behind the old web browser control, will be phased out in June. And that implies that the old web browser control in Access will no longer work. So that's quite a bit sooner than I think they had originally planned. So if you have any applications that rely on the old, i.e. web browser control, be forewarned that that's going to quit working. Does anybody have that situation?
I don't think I do.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know whether that's a big deal or not a big deal. Okay, there is a current list of bug fixes. This one is really small. If you're interested, you can go and look. But I think there were 3 minor bugs last month, which is very encouraging because it means things are quite stable. I'm going to remind you that we're always looking for applications to showcase on Access Forever. We've done several in the past. To me, like earlier tonight, Tom was talking about using Power Automate and Flow, and Kent was talking about using link servers. Anything like that where an innovative use of Access as the central piece of an application is interesting, and we'd like to share that if you don't mind, if you have something you'd like to share with the rest of the community. And of course, we have the Discord server. I think we're up to 179 members today when I just looked. Attracting some attention. Big news for me is the Access User Group has a new website, recently redesigned, launched last week. As you can see from my screenshot here, the calendar is quite different looking, and I wanted to show that. If you go to the calendar, the first thing that popped out at me is all times are in Chicago time zone. So when I scroll down and look at my meeting, it says it starts at 8:30 Central. And that kind of threw me off the first time I saw it, but then I realized, okay, yeah, that's what they're saying. they're all based to the central time zone, but if you actually go to the page, it displays the correct time zone. And it's quite a bit more modern looking, I think. I think they did a pretty good job, except apparently Tom informed me tonight that when Hayden migrated all the meetings, apparently there was like a generic meeting ID, and I didn't catch that when I copied it out. So I apologize for that oversight on my part. Creating auditing in an Access database. In the discussion with other developers in attendance during the meeting and in subsequent discussions with Tom, we surfaced a significant limitation in the way data macros handle long text fields. This limitation is in addition to the lack of an .old property, for which I proposed a VBA workaround in the presentation. That limitation is this: when editing a long text field where the length of the string in that field exceeds theoretically approximately 2038 characters, Access adopts a different record locking method. That record locking method prevents us from retrieving the long text value in VBA. We get an error message saying the record is locked, it can't be used. We can't even retrieve it for other purposes. In developing my system prior to the meeting, I had not yet encountered a sample record with a comment field that long in my sample data. Therefore, when listening to the presentation and the subsequent discussions in this video, keep in mind that we hadn't yet exposed what could turn out to be a showstopper. Efforts to find a workaround are ongoing, though, so stay tuned. Thank you. I'll tell you a little bit about the project that I'm working on that I worked on this for. A couple of years ago, a small museum in Wyoming, where I grew up, my hometown, was looking for a database. They have a collection of books, and the person who was responsible for that put a post on Facebook asking if somebody would be willing to do a database. And of course, I leapt at the chance and do something for my hometown and do something besides play with the pencils waiting for the afternoon mail to come now that I'm retired. I built the database originally using Power Apps, and the reason I did that is the building which houses these books, roughly 2,000 of them, has no internet connection. So there was no way for me to interact with them directly. They actually had volunteers who went through the shelves, copied all the titles of the books into spreadsheets, and then mailed me the spreadsheets, and I used the Google Books API through the Power Apps interface to pull all the data. So I was able to get what I think is a pretty reasonable representation of their books. But the Power Apps app itself would only have worked if they had been willing to invest in a tablet with the ability to reach out to the internet. So that was kind of a hurdle we had to get past that we never did get past. So my next attempt was to create an Access database. It's a standalone database. It's going to sit on their computer. After a year, they finally got a new computer with, I think it has Windows 10 on it now. So we can now actually install Access and run it. My next step is to create a version with auditing. So picture this: you build an Access database for a client. It's running great. And then you get the call. Hey, we accidentally deleted a bunch of records. Can you help? And so as soon as I sent this to their IT guy, that feeling came over me that I have a big hole here that I have to fix. Now, if it's a client in your hometown down the street, no problem. You can drive over and fix it. My client is 900 miles away in Wyoming. They have no internet connection. I can't remote in. I can't team viewer. I can't see what happened. So I decided I wanted an insurance policy, and that is a black box recorder for their database. Something that would capture every new record, every change, every deletion. So when things go sideways, and they inevitably will, they can just email me that file and I can work some recovery. That's why I chose data macros. I know you're thinking, why not just write VBA event procedures? Here's why I think data macros are actually better suited for this purpose. First, they're table level, not form level. Users can't bypass them. Whether someone edits data through a form, query, or even directly in the table, data macros are going to catch it. And since it's so far out of my control, so far out of my reach, I wanted something that foolproof. I don't intend for my user to bypass forms, but once I send her the ACCDB and her IT guys, and I'm doing the IT guy in quotes because he's a local volunteer who happens to know a little bit more about computers than she does. Once I mail it to him and he puts it on her computer, it's out of my sight, out of my hands, out of my control to fix it. Data macros are built in. There's no modules to maintain, no VBA references to break. They're embedded right in the table structure. And third, the way I came up with this solution, I leaned on a couple of my friends, Claude and Chatty, and they helped me put together this package. So it's really simple to implement these data macros. If I need to use the same approach again for a different database, or one of you wants to use it, it's quite simple to reconfigure. And with 3 mouse clicks and a little bit of copy paste for the 2 VBA helper functions, you'll have a working audit system. Let's dive in. It will run the auditing to create new records. It'll capture the values of new records when they're added to the table as of the time the record is created. If changes are made to one or more fields in existing records, only changed data field values are logged. And I do this by comparing new value to old value. If they're different, log it. If they're the same, that field didn't get changed, don't log it. And for deleted records, I wanted to capture all of the values and all of the fields in the record as of the moment it was deleted. I realize this approach is only one of several possible methods. Data macros are reliable, they always fire. And as I said before, they run for added, modified, and deleted records. They run before insert and after insert data macros, before update and after update data macros, and before delete and after delete data macros. I only use the after insert, after update, and after delete methods. You mentioned about the fact that they fire regardless of how changes are made. They're unobtrusive. They work without VBA support with one exception, which I'll go into later. They are attached directly to tables and travel with them. And they're pretty low maintenance. They don't necessarily need to be updated when the table usage changes. If you create a new form to run against a table, you don't have to go through creating all the VBA to audit that new form. There are some downsides. Data macros are a pain for many of us, I think. Data macro code is outside our wheelhouse. We're VBA centric. Data macro logic is different enough to make creating them challenging for some of us. And I struggled with that at first. And that was one reason why I went the automated route. Data macro code can be quite verbose compared to VBA. Each field is a separate step in a macro, as opposed to using set-based inserts. Do I need to explain what I'm talking about there? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Any questions about that? I found that writing data macros is tedious for all those reasons. And what happened was I set out to create the data macros on one small table that had 3 fields in it. And by the time I was done with that table, I had had plenty of data macro writing. And I went to Claude and asked him, what do I do here? Now, these large language model AIs have certain advantages that worked really well in this context. They're not easily bored. They'll do the same thing over and over and over and over again. Tedious, verbose DM code doesn't draw complaints. It just says, sure, I'll do another one. Sure, I'll do another one. It doesn't care. In fact, it's been my experience that Claude and ChatGPT both, they will readily spawn reams of code at the slightest provocation. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. But they are also good at iterative development. What I found was once I explained what I needed to do and how I needed to do it, there was a really fast cycle of giving it a prompt, getting a response back, testing it, finding where the weaknesses were, finding what I had overlooked, finding things that it had thought about that I hadn't considered, send back another prompt with the new status, new criteria, new requirements, get a new response back and retest. That sped up the process quite a bit, not just eliminating writing tedious code, but iterating with improvements at each step along the way. So let me give you a demo.
George,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I've got a question on the last one, if I may. If you could go back a slide.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes.
You talk about the LLM producing loads of code for you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's not VBA. How do you get macro code? Does macro code copy and paste? How does that work?
That is the beauty of this solution. I have VBA that writes macro code. As a result of this process, you've kind of raised the curtain before I was ready to raise it. But at this point, I have VBA that creates data macros.
Okay. So you'll show us that later.
I'll show you that later. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I could not have written it myself. I mean, but with their help, I got it done. So I'm going to start. And let's look at this version here. So are you seeing the database opening now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the Lander Trail Foundations library. I'm going to go straight to the books table. It has the most fields of all of the tables. So there's an AfterInsert data macro, an AfterUpdate data macro, and an AfterDelete up macro on the publications table. So when I create a new record, I don't see. And I'll pick an author at random here. I won't go through the entire process. And we'll say this is one of Gary G. Allen's books. And when I save it, the data macro ran and created entries into my audit table. So now I'm going to modify this one. Oops. And save it again. So this is an after update. And now I'm going to delete the book that I just created, which fires the after delete. This is the table that is being generated. It created 54 records in those 3 steps. Okay, so the first thing that happened was we wrote 24 records representing the creation of the new record. The way this works, we store the name of the table, the primary key of the record being inserted, the fields in that record, all the auditable fields. And let me repeat that because I don't audit all fields. There are some fields that are not necessary for an audit trail. So these are only the auditable fields. The old value didn't exist, so I insert new record. And this is the new value of those fields which I did populate. The publication ID. Oops, I went too far. We want to stop here. There's the publication ID. There's the title, the pub sort. I won't explain that. It's a feature of the database. It's a second version of the title used for sorting. And the number of volumes. Those are the data points that I entered when I created the new record, because I also assigned it to a publisher or to an author. It picked the creator ID from the creator table, the publication ID that we just entered, and inserted that information into the publication creator table, and the audit was created here. Then I changed things. There was nothing in the, okay, I'm gonna come back to comments and internal comments in a bit.
George,
Yes.
it doesn't say internal comments, it says interal.
You're the first person who ever noticed my spelling deficiency.
I'm sure it wasn't a spelling error, George, it was just a typo.
It was a typo that has persisted through 2 or 3 versions. Yes. I do this every once in a while. When I catch myself, I think I'm going to leave it just like that to remind myself that I'm not infallible. And that's pretty much why I did it. Okay, so these 4 fields here are long text. They're all defined as long text. The reason there's a reason for that. Comments. When I was pulling the data from the Google Books API, I could get, 400, 500, 600 character descriptions of the book. And so I made the comments long text and stored those descriptions in that field. And the internal comments, I just made long text by analogy that's probably where the librarian or the staff there is going to want to keep track of confidential information about the book that they don't want to publish, but they give them plenty of room to take their notes. Publication title also turned out to be a long text field, primarily because some of the information I got back had a title and a subtitle, and combined, those would exceed the 255 character limit. So by virtue of putting both the title and the subtitle, I ended up with long text fields there. And the sort version of the title is also. Now, these 4 are different from all of the others, and I'll explain that in a minute. But rather than try to look for a difference between the value here and the old and the new, I am storing both versions. The reason I had to do that is I discovered that data macros can't access the old value of a long text field. So if I'm trying to do a difference between an old value and a new value on a long text field, it just doesn't work. So I'm handling them this way. I'm simply saying everything in that field is going to go in the old value. Everything in the new value is going to go here. If they're the same, great. If they're different, we'll sort that out. Tom has a question which I will address. Yes, PubSort probably should be converted to text 255. These are the 2 fields that I added when I made the modification. There was no old value. Now there's a new value. And when I deleted it, and Kent's saying for a long text, you could hash and compare the hash. Keep in mind that the title here is 3 simple steps. I could make this a lot more complicated. And as a matter of fact, I project that some of you are already looking for ideas like those two right there, to make it work better. So I anticipate seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of improvements, enhancements, and I'd more than welcome that. When I deleted the book, we copied all the old values that we had, and in the new value, that's deleted. So this one is identified as a book that was deleted. So that's how the audit log works. Are there any other comments or questions?
I have a comment or a question.
Yes, go.
A remark. Let's say your customer calls you and say, oops, I didn't really want to delete the stories of the Old West. Can you bring that record back, please? Do you have the code already in place, or is that still to be developed?
That I haven't worked on yet. What I would have to do, and like I said, because of this distance and lack of communication, the only way I can see to do that is have her send me the ACCDB or extract the audit log from the ACCDB, have her send me that. I could reconstruct it and send it back to her. But because of this disconnect, well, I don't want to be unkind, but there's no way I could coach her through reconstructing it herself.
But how would they send it to you if there's no internet connection?
They would put it on a thumb drive, take it home, and email it to me.
Got it.
I mean, yeah, I can't see any other way around that. Or actually, she uses OneDrive, so she could take it home and put it up on OneDrive for me. But it would involve a thumb drive and what do they call that? SneakerNet. It's well, unless someone wants to donate a few $1,000s to install internet, we're kind of stuck.
George, what about,
Yes.
on that point, what about implementing inside the database some logic that allows them to, on a separate form, go through and reintegrate data from the audit, which is available to them? So, for instance, as Tom was asking about deleted records, and it wouldn't have to be deleted, you could say, well, search through there. Well, that's a deleted record. That's the one I want. Can I have that back? And then your software would say, okay, and then it would add it, and obviously it would also audit the re-edition. So it would get put back into the audit file as well as being re-enabled in the live data.
There are two answers to that, Adrian. I thought about that, and I'm still thinking about that.
Okay.
As I said before,
I should think that you'd retain the old value when you delete a record for every field.
Say that again.
But when you delete a record, you should retain the old value for every column.
It does. When you delete a record.
Okay. So those ones that don't have a value, they were actually null, right? Okay.
I never entered them. If you remember, I only entered two.
Yeah, my bad.
No, that's a good point. Well, I guess my my first answer to that is I thought about doing that.
So you're back on my point, yes, George?
We're back in your point, about allowing them to self-restore. This has been a 2-year odyssey to get to this point. I'm kind of, it would require a great deal more investment of my time to implement that.
Sure.
And well, I guess if I finally say to myself, this is the only way to make it work, then I will probably do that. but I've been hesitant for two reasons. One is I'm not sure how well that would work. It would have to be absolutely bulletproof. And it is a larger investment of my time.
Truth be told, George is waiting for one of us/you who needs that capability to write it, and then he'll send it off to his client.
Yeah, this is a group effort. I would love to see someone implement something like that. And as a matter of fact, I have these files on my GitHub where you can go and download them and do exactly that.
I was thinking exactly like, and then I looked at that list of tables and I thought, stuff that for a game of soldiers.
Yeah. I mean, you know, ultimately, I think probably what will happen is my conscience will get the better of me and I will break down and say, okay, I'll do it.
Well, before you do it, you would want to know that it would be a feature that is going to be used.
Yes.
We did something like this 25 years ago for a customer. This was actually in Excel. And when they did a file save of the Excel file, we would send all the data to our SQL server that had the aggregate of everything, including history. And so they could actually call us and say, can you get me the data back from 3 p.m. yesterday? And we could do that. And that did, and we would charge them for that. Say, hey, that's going to cost us 2 hours to do that. So here's your invoice. And they did actually take advantage of that on a maybe once a month kind of basis. There was about 250 customers that were using this. So it was used enough that it was worth investing the time to do it. In this particular case, it's maybe a little bit more debatable. Perhaps you would say, when we start up the application, the first thing we're going to do is make a copy of the backend with a date and timestamp, so that if the shit hits the fan, you can always say, well, that's too bad, but I can still go back to how the database was an hour ago.
Yeah.
Well, here you just have to iterate through and create an insert statement. But the only difficulty there, I mean, you've got the primary key, you've got you don't actually say which field's the primary key, and you don't know what data type it is, so you don't know whether to surround the value in quotes or not.
You've just led me into the next phase of my presentation, Ken. I have a table called data macro config, which does exactly that. This is also one of the tables that's generated by the code.
Here's one he's prepared earlier.
Here's one that yeah.
George,
So-
could you explain all that again? Because I didn't catch Kent's question. So your response saying, oh, that's a perfect answer to that question, didn't help me a lot.
Okay, he was wondering about which field in the table is the primary key.
Uh-huh.
There
Oh,
it
right.
is.
Oh,
And what is the data type?
right.
Why
This
didn't
is
you
to
just add
construct
the
an
table
insert.
itself?
Yeah.
And
This
so,
is to construct an insert statement to bring the deleted record back from the dead.
yeah, this
Yeah,
serves
so,
multiple purposes. It's used originally to generate the data macros. It's used to identify the primary key for the audit table. And it can be used to recreate if necessary.
And we all know that no real Access developer uses anything other than auto numbers for their primary keys.
Well, let me put it this
That's
way.
true.
If I'm building this system, it's going to have an auto number primary key. If you want to build a system around some other operation, that's fine too. You know, that could be another enhancement, another variation. If someone wanted to grab the files off GitHub and do that, that would be wonderful also. But I also want to talk about this table, which is also generated and used. And this gets into the fact that when we're doing the comparisons, I'm doing a string compare, a binary string compare on fields. I can't do that on long text fields because I don't have the old value. So instead of storing the real old value, I'm just storing the entire string prior to the change. So this runs on the before update or the before delete event so that I'm capturing whatever was in that field beforehand so that I can compare it to whatever's there afterwards. This is kind of a compromise workaround. So, are there any more questions before we go to the next step? Yes, and as Tom points out, that's exactly how this works. The code in the VBA generates the the data macro config table on the fly. Anything else you want to look at or talk about here before I go on?
I do have a question, which is how big is the data going to be for this system?
I can't see it growing much more than 2,500 records. I know they have just under 2,000 now. I know of that number, some portion are duplicates because, like I said, when I was building this, I got spreadsheets from her volunteers, and I know that the same book appeared multiple times on multiple spreadsheets, and I had no way of knowing if they were two copies or a duplicate of the same copy. So out of this 1,929, there are probably about 50 or 60 duplicates. But they also have a lot of non-book materials, manuscripts, letters, newspaper articles that I think they want to include in here. So when they add that, that's probably going to bring them another 400 or 500 items, but it'll never get bigger than that, I don't think.
No, and my question was more to the how big is the recovery data going to be? Because you're doing this for every single insert for new stuff. I'm assuming you didn't do this for the inserts for the old stuff.
No, up till this point, I didn't have. Actually, the original data is in SQL Server with temporal tables, the way Tom and Kent were talking earlier. The SQL Server database where this originated does have that feature already implemented. So I'm not worried about that there. If we ever do get it back to the point where we can reconnect it to SQL Server, that's handled. Right now, I'm mainly showing it to you and asking for feedback on enhancements and things to do. And I've already got several excellent suggestions tonight. But no, you're right. The audit log in here could grow quite substantially, and I have to figure out whether I want to just export it. Linda suggested a separate database, which is only used to do that. And that's one of the thoughts that I've had is that I'll create, instead of a front end and a back end, I'll have a front end, a back end, and a side ACDC where I just put the audit stuff.
That's
that makes absolute sense to me.
Because if your main one goes down, you can recover from the backup.
And if it's complete from day one, this one won't be. But if it's complete from day one, you could regenerate everything. Yeah.
Now, could you, if you cared to make it complete, could you read the data out and reinsert it? And the reinsert would trigger all of this stuff to happen for every record as you went through and read it out and wrote it back in again.
I'd have to ask Chatty that, or Claude. I'm sure you could.
That'd be a bit like how SQL Server does it. You could have temporal updates and bring it back to a particular state in time by having a source backup, that point at which the audit starts, and then applying up to whatever date and time is specified.
Yeah, you could do a records. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna take a cough drop here. Hang on a second. You could definitely use this table to automate the recovery from time span. I knew when I started sharing this that I would get dozens of really good ideas, and I'm really appreciative of that.
George, quick question. Your date changed, and by extension, every date that a date time field that you use, is that UTC, or is it presumably it's stored UTC regardless of whether it's applied locally?
Ooh, that's a good point. No, this is local time.
So that
You
would.
see, yeah, so I can convert it to UTC.
I'm just thinking that if you had it, I mean, it's all going to be relative to each other, so it probably won't make a lot of difference. But you're talking about Wyoming, and I'm guessing they're slightly different time zone. There must be mountain time.
It's 1 hour different. Yeah.
So
I think
if
there's
you're
an
doing,
API for that.
There's an API for that, but I'm not going to go into APIs for this. That's an interesting point because I'm not sure that would impact the workflow very much, because
no, I
if
don't
she's
think.
doing it entirely there, and the real changes, the ones that she's auditing, are done on her computer in her isolated building,
Yeah,
I don't think it would matter. But it might be worthwhile to look at that as an enhancement as well. Yeah, Tom. Yeah.
just don't get a situation where you're doing any work for her on the database, and that you know that you then you transfer to her location with dates which are from a different time zone, because it would. But then at the end of the day, even that wouldn't be much, because it's going to take longer than an hour to get the thing transferred. It might be quick to get it to her house or her OneDrive, but she's got to take it from there to the library.
Yeah, I mean, this. Sometimes I laugh when I think about this. It's like, how many hurdles can you throw in my path and see? And I've been really pleased about where we gotten to, but there've been times when I just said this is not worth it. I think it's because I'm stubborn that I've gotten this far. So anyway, I'm going to close this one and open another copy. We've got about 15 minutes left. I had hoped to have more time, so I will run through this part really quickly. I have prepared a second copy, which is empty. Start with the tables. There are no data macros on any of these tables, and none of my config tables, my data macro config tables, exist yet. So let's go into the VBA.
So before you do that, is this
Yes.
data real changes that somebody actually made out there in the world, or is this test data?
This is my real data. It's a backup copy of my real data. I made a backup copy specifically for this presentation. As soon as
No. What I meant was the data for backing up, changes to the database and stuff that you were showing us previously. The data in there, were people in the library out there actually making changes to these things, causing
no,
that
I'm
stuff?
sorry. I probably skipped over that. I did 100% of this myself.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I'll, as I said, I created a Power Apps application that runs this Google API. Google has a library of several million books. And if you give them a book title, a book author, or the ISBN code from the back of the book, they will give you back title, author, these comments. When I talked about the length of these comments,
Yeah.
this is what you get back from Google. And I populated 1,929 books. And as I say, I'm sure some of them are duplicates, because the name on the book on the spreadsheet was just the title, and I had no way of knowing whether that was a second copy of the same book or two different people had listed the book on their spreadsheets. So I put them in, and it's her responsibility to clean it up. So Here's how we do it. This code is a co-production of Claude and myself. And as I iterated through the process, or as I described the iterative process at the beginning, I told it what I wanted. It gave me a suggestion. I said, that's great, but that doesn't work. Do this. And after about 4 or 5 back and forth circles around that, I ended up with this code. There are 3 subs that create the audit tables and populate the config table and generate all of the audit data macros. I'll show you these 3. This one I will give you a quick look at, but it's very complex because it addresses the question about the VBA does generate the XML and attach it to the tables as macros, but that's probably in 15 more minutes, I'm not going to get through that. The first one is the create audit tables. If I run it, and this is where the 3 mouse clicks comes from. I run this one. I now have 3 audit tables that I didn't have before. The audit log, the long text backup, and the data macro config. I may not even have 15 more minutes to talk. I apologize.
It sounds
You
like
need a
you're
drink, George.
Yeah, let me do that. I'll tell you what, I'll show you the okay. There's one of the macro that's one of the macro XML created routines. You can kind of gaze at that for a minute. I'll be right back.
Yes, that was yes, slight audio issues. Yeah, I think there are more vocal issues there, Tom.
So we just create an XML and that gets loaded into the macro somehow.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like the XML is being created as a long string within the code, certainly.
Absolutely, that's exactly what happens. It takes the well, I'm jumping ahead. The first step.
George, why not give us 5 minutes of sitting there rabbiting on pointlessly and give your voice a chance to react? I know you felt obliged to jump in, and I know you want to be helpful. I just think you possibly need an opportunity to give it 5 minutes rest.
You're absolutely right. I think part of the problem is I rehearsed multiple times today, and I think I overdid it. So here, this, okay. Listen. Okay. So if you looked at ribbon at macros, you recognize the XML schema.
Yeah, that's probably what the AI uses to at least know something about the XML itself. The way we did it for the Northwind project was we created the first one manually, and then they were all kind of copies of each other.
Exactly. That's exactly what I did. I gave it one data macro to work with it, and then it cloned it.
It's interesting. This
Claude help you clone, or so not just Claude but clone, Claude and clone.
Yeah, Claude cloned the macro.
This reminds me of the code that used to be required to work on ribbons back in 2007 when they first came in.
Still is.
Well, yes, obviously. Sorry, I imagine it's obvious. But that's when I first came across it. I don't do a lot of XML work, so for me this is all a bit out there, but it does remind me of what was we saw examples of back in 2007 when it came to if you want to change your ribbons programmatically, this is the sort of thing you need to play with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Back in the 90s, we started using XML to send data around because it was text. It'd get through firewalls and stuff like that.
Sure.
And it wasn't until fairly recently that Google had a method of sending binary stuff. So I can't remember what it was, but
one of the
but now we all use JSON instead of XML, but more same dog, different name.
One of the things we did go multiple iterations on is, in order for this to work, I had to combine the AfterInsert, AfterUpdate, and AfterDelete macros into one XML string to get it to go back onto the table as 3 macros, because originally the code I got created the AfterInsert macro, attached it to the table, created the AfterUpdate macro, overwrote the first.
Yeah. When you tried attaching that, it overwrote instead of appended.
I said, well, that isn't going to work. So then we revised it. So this is like I said, this is probably a 3rd or 4th iteration result after finding out how these things work and don't work.
What was that with lookup record?
Okay, this is the one that handles. Okay, the long text fields. This is the part of the data macro that is required to handle the long text, and there are VBA helper functions that work with this. Because I cannot access the old value in data macro, I have to write the current value of the long text fields into this helper table, this LongTextBackup table, in the before update event. So then when the after update macro runs, it gets the old value, not from the table itself, but from this reference table, the LongTextBackup. It goes there and says, what was the value you saved for me before you ran the update? And it uses that.
That's what that table's for.
Yep. And I'm very proud of this because I was the one who suggested this to Claude.
So they're using old as the property for the deleted.
Excuse me.
Yeah, old here is actually I want to say that
the same as what the SQL Server would call deleted?
Yes. SQL Server handles it. I don't think SQL Server cares what type of data it works with, but the data macro simply can't access the old value of fields after they've been changed in long text. And I'm sure there's probably other data types that aren't going to be handled as well either. Now, if you've got attachment fields or calculated fields, I don't know what would happen with them.
Well, calculated field is a design time thing.
Yeah. So I'm going to finish this part here. There's my second mouse click. We populated my.
And so what did it do there to get the XML into the table?
We don't have the XML in the table yet. I'm on step 2 or 3. So that one I just recreated my config table. And another thing that occurred to me, I'll stick to the path because we're running out of time.
Quick pause, George, and while I'm explaining this, you can keep quiet and keep your voice rested. I just wanted to comment that that just illustrated something that Tom VS mentioned in the comments earlier about being able to automate that listing of all the fields and all the tables and what's where, all the rest of it. There was a comment saying, yeah, you could do that, and that's exactly what it turns out you have done.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting.
But the ability to use that to recreate, I mean, to automate the recreation is something that I hadn't really gotten to yet. So that's very, very valuable. I think that's, I can build the mod. I can build the module to recreate records around that with a combination of those two tables. With the audit table and the config table, I can use that to rebuild damaged records. So I may, in fact, turn out not to be as lazy as I thought I was going to be when it comes to that. Unless,
Can I just check? Can I just check, George? That code that you have for logging, that doesn't depend on what your backend tables are or how they're configured. It will take whatever you've got and build a picture of that, if you like, in that table for you. So you could do, what I'm saying is this means it can be more flexibly used. It doesn't have to be your database. This code will work pretty much on any backend database and provide the same amount of data and functionality. Obviously, it's one part of the overall thing, but it's still an important part, and that could run on any database.
absolutely, you're ahead of me there. I was going to come back to that later, but
Oh,
let me finish this part, and then we'll go to that step. So when I run this, it will generate and attach all of the data macros to my tables. I showed you before that they had no data macros when I run this. So it successfully generated audit data macros for 17 tables. And now, if I go back and look at bookcase, it has an AfterInsert data macro attached to it. And this is the part what I was talking about this tedious nature of it. Every field has to be set individually. And this is only the fields that you're going to audit. So it's very verbose and very tedious to write these things. So that's why I stopped doing it and went this way. Let's look at, I closed that too soon. I wanted to look at the AfterUpdate. So this is that big enough to see?
Yep.
Okay. So what I do is a string comparison of the current value and the old value in that field. I do a binary comparison, so I capture case changes for letters, upper, lowercase. If there is any difference between them, then we log that field. If they are the same, I don't bother to log it because I know that it's the same value. It's just going to take up space if I do it. And I do that for each of these. That only works, as I said, if I have don't have long text field. So on publication, where I do have long text fields, and this one's got a lot more to handle. Okay. Okay. So
That is a big macro. Wow.
yeah, and all of that was generated. You saw how fast it was generated by that code. So this,
That's the only way to go.
yeah, it's the only way to go if you're going to do this. So the first thing you do is you look up a record in the backup table, where we're looking at that table, that primary key, and a bunch of other criteria, I think.
Can you use an XOR in there? So, for example, because at the moment you're using NZ to handle nulls, but if you use an XOR, this is null, that's null. So if one of them's null, but the other one isn't, then you get a positive.
Here?
Yeah, because like if you're using NZ, right, if you're changing something from null to zero, a numeric field from null to zero, it's not going to register a change. Or if you're changing from zero to null, it's not going to register a change. But that's a string. So if you're changing an empty, a zero length string to a null or vice versa, you're not going to register a change either.
I'm not following the reason for doing
Okay,
it.
so if this field does not equal that field, all right?
Right.
If one of them is null, you're not going to get the right answer. But if you go, if this one isn't like the same as this one, X or field one is null, or is null field one, X or field two is null field two. That would give you. So if one of them was null,
That
Well,
wouldn't work, Kent.
that
Because
would
all
not,
then
that,
you're comparing is whether it's null or not. You're not comparing
yeah.
if they have values, if they're different. You'll just say,
yeah,
oh, well,
no,
they're
that was the
not
first
null,
part
that's
of it.
great.
That was the first part of the argument. So the where this isn't equal this, and then you've got the or where one is null and the other isn't.
Well,
That's the second part of the argument.
yeah, yeah. I have to think about that a little bit more.
Not
Yeah,
sure that
because
would be very helpful.
using the NZ comparison, you're not going to get the difference between an empty string and a null, or in a numeric field, the difference between a zero and a null.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So if one if one is null and the other is an empty string,
Yeah.
I can't think of a situation where that would come into.
Oh, I can. I've seen a lot of them lately.
Okay, so we're talking about entering records in a table.
Question is whether you care, but I mean,
No, Kent, I think you're missing the point there. It's not whether you care. It's generally speaking, fields will either take a null or they'll take an empty string.
yeah, except if you don't allow them to.
Very few fields
Oh,
will
okay.
allow both.
Okay, all right. Yeah, now I'm tracking where you're going with that. Okay, yeah. All right. That was what because I'm just thinking, did they enter a name? Did they not enter a name? Did they change the name? Did they change the title of the book? I wasn't thinking of a case where somebody typed in a name and then deleted it again.
Yeah, now the access user interface will tend to set an empty string back to a null. But I've seen instances where people, like this MySQL database I'm working with, there are lots of empty strings in fields.
Okay.
And if
Well,
you change a field from an empty string to a null, that's a change. But the NZ won't pick up on it.
Okay, I think that's important, but I think there's some other things that I would rather focus on.
Yeah, no, you're right. Move on.
Yeah. So yeah, but that is definitely something that I hadn't thought about. So anyway, basically this part says if this is if it's the comments, which I know is a long text field, go to my backup text table to get the value for the old here. It comes from the backup record, old value, as opposed to the current table old field. And that's what that's all about. So we've covered almost all of the important stuff. There's some other things that are worth looking at as well.
So can you just show me the code where you insert the XML into the tables?
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah. Well,
We haven't looked at that yet, that's why.
I didn't actually get there. All right. So this one creates all data macros. Okay. Wait a minute. We start here. This one generates all the audit data macros. It does so by going through my macro config table, pulling out the table names, the field names, and so on. Creates a dictionary. And it stuffs all of those values, the field name, data type, the primary key, into that array. Okay. Then it creates a temporary file which will hold the XML.
That's not a file.
Well, it set a path. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, it sets the path where it will eventually create the
Yeah, we can see that.
the XML file will go there. It goes through each of the tables, processes them, creates all of the data macros for that table.
So they're in separate files for each table, or it's all one?
There's a separate file, there's a separate XML file for each table. Within that separate file, there are 3 data macros.
And the reason for that is because the fields of each table are different, and each field is named individually in the macro.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that goes back to that same tedious nature of data macros. Everything is one-off. There is no, you can't even do copy paste really, because you got to change the field name or you got to change something.
So we do an import.
Yeah. So what happens? It creates that XML file and then does a transfer text to bring it back. Let me see if I can find that. We're building the XML here.
Mm-hmm.
Now we go back and we find our temp path and we give it the table name, which is what Tom just pointed out. Each table has its own data macro XML. Writes that XML content to that file and closes it. And then it does this one. It does a load from text, bring it in as a table data macro for that table. And I think, Tom, that should be familiar.
So the name has to be the table name underscore data macros.xml.
That's my convention, yes.
That's your convention.
That's my convention. All it really needs is a unique name and the XML extension.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's it. And these 3 then build the XML for the different.
The file name is immaterial in a way, but what's important is the content of that file that is specific to each table name.
Yeah.
And then once you do a macro load from text.
But you're not telling the import which table it's for. That's the table name is held in the XML.
Okay, this is happening in a loop. If I can get back up here, this is happening in a loop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's the
right
for each table in our you can read as well as I can speak. For each table, we run this process one at a time. Oh, here's another. Yeah. So is there anything else you want to focus on? Because I can talk about 2 or 3 other.
George, sorry to interrupt. Could we go back to where the load is done inside the create all data macros? Because Kent asked about how do you specify which table it's related to.
Because it's happening in a loop where that is the table.
No, I get that, but I want to see that code if you can. The code, the actual command that says load this table. You had it a minute ago, but then you moved off.
Yeah.
Not in there. It's nothing to do with that.
Yeah, the transfer.
Yeah.
Data macro. Yeah.
We're right. No, it's still not there.
Well, let's just do it. Oh, shoot. That was a mistake. That was a mistake.
Because that do command transfer.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's quicker than me scrolling randomly.
Oh, Results
Because
of
you
fine
know you
text.
specify that it's a data macro, but you don't specify whether it's a
Oh,
what
Ken,
table.
there's no point talking about it until we can see it, because even if you understand what
Yeah.
you're talking about, no one else is going to.
Well,
That's why I wanted to bring it up so we can
we will when
discuss
we
it,
see it. Yeah.
specify.
Hey, George,
Yes.
you should be looking for load from text.
Load from text. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Good man.
Thank you. Okay.
There we go. Now, AC table data macro. Table name is specified in there, Kent. Yeah. See that?
Okay, I didn't see that before.
Not the
but
path. Well, that's why I wanted to bring this code up. So, because you asked, it was to answer your question that I wanted to see this, because it seemed like a good question. But what is specified there is not only the file path, which is the data that you're loading a file, but also the table name it's associated with, and that's part of that instruction, if you like, that statement. So that's I think that answers your question fully.
Yep, it does.
Yep. That's one reason I like fully qualified.
Oh, me too.
Yeah,
Good Lord. Although they're fairly obvious, table name and file path.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Claude is pretty good at naming stuff.
Yeah.
And then it deletes that.
I noticed that earlier, yeah. Which is essentially, it doesn't matter what you call it, because it ain't going to stay there for very long.
Yeah. Now, this module, which I created separately, all it does is it creates a backup of every data macro and then strips it off. And it does it by loading an empty XML file.
Ah.
Yeah, I see it there, blank.
Yeah.
How does it back up?
It does. Where's that? Where's that?
Save as text, I'm sure.
Save as text. Where's the save as text?
I was going to say, that sounds about right. But then there's lots of commands here which don't look like they're doing save as text.
Is there a...
There it is.
Huh, there it is.
Yep.
Yeah. And then afterwards it's application load from text, which will be the blank file.
Yeah. So so it creates a backup and then it just goes out and gets that blank XML and blows all the data macros away.
But you don't need a backup because you just created with the other code.
Yeah, I mean this was when I was developing and having lots and lots of getting to work right. One last thing I wanted to mention, and then I'll let you have at it from here on in.
What was the last thing you said, George?
All right. Where did we go? Where did we go? Where did we go? To populate config table. Oh, I also was lazy here. Rather than create a table-driven solution, I just hard-coded my criteria for what would go into the config table. I said, give me anything that starts with a TBL extension, except for the audit log, my backup, and my
right, yeah.
And then I had one called load time, which was for testing local versus remote SQL Server. I don't even know what this one is. I haven't yet deleted it. And then this PUTT file is from Greg Reagan's custom tooltips. And I didn't see any point in adding data macros. But what
sorry, George, custom tooltip, would that not be in the front end?
Yeah, but this is a demo, so
it's a demo. It's a demo. It's probably just I have to think about that. I wanted to talk about something else. One thing I thought when I was looking at this afternoon, too late, and I avoided the temptation of trying to modify the demo hours before the presentation, but I was thinking if I changed my auto lock tables to be USIS tables, then I wouldn't have to worry about coding them out.
Well, yeah, or anything other than TBL, frankly.
Yeah. So I thought, yeah, okay. But this one and these two are just like probably leftovers from different. Yeah. But if I were to this could also be a table driven. And then the other thing that occurred to me is I could add a field to the config table which would say include or exclude, so that I could, instead of filtering it all, I could just load everything into that table and then manually check those that I didn't want to use. And I think that might actually be more work than doing it here, but it was a thought that I had.
But more flexible. That actually matches, or at least I do have a question in there, which is how does it determine which fields should be audited? That tells us which tables you want to include. You did mention it only certain fields earlier. Is it a good time to explain how they are selected? Field name. Oh, so everyone except those.
Yeah. And that's why I say it, rather than get into this nitpicky hard coding, I should make it more global in scope and just add a field that would say include this one, don't include this one.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's also perhaps some data types you can't really store in your audit table, like attachments or
Oh yeah,
a lot of funny business.
Yeah, I was fretting about what to do about attachment fields. That would be just the same thing. I just say don't even do it. Yeah. Great idea.
I must admit,
Which brings up the point of, if we ever write code to bring the record back, and you've just excluded several fields, several data types, what is the value of it anymore?
Yeah. Well, these are all SQL Server fields.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are from the
migration assistant.
Yeah, this is the migration, and these are the temporal tables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I must admit, I think you could put a table that said that had names of tables that to exclude, or prefixes of tables to exclude, and names of fields to exclude. And if it's a prefix, you would have a field which had a number of characters to use, and if it was the whole field, you wouldn't have that set. And then you could include in the same table something that says a type of field, like, as you say, attachments and blobs would be excluded from such thing. I think that's pretty fantastic, actually, George. I wasn't anticipating being that enthralled this evening. I thought, oh well, I'll come along, all the rest of it. But I've actually found this quite fascinating.
Yeah, to me, the really exciting thing is getting all these ideas and comments back from other people and thinking, oh yeah, this is because I sit here and I talk to myself and I talk to Claude and I find myself going.
And luckily enough, there's another one called Chatty, because you get so bored talking just to yourself all the time.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Let me see if I can show you my GitHub site, and I would encourage you. Okay, I talked about that in the presentation. If you go here, I have the modules. Some of these are I'm not sure why that one is there. The auto log tables. Well, this is my error handler. My global error handler is in here. Oh, these have to do with, I think, no, I'm not sure why I put those up there because they're not part of this. But that's the ad. And if you don't mind waiting till tomorrow, I want to make sure that what is up here is the version I showed you tonight. But if you go there, you can get the files. And I'll put that in the chat.
It appears from the file names that there are things in here that are not necessarily related to the data macros.
Yeah, I
signed tooltips.
Yeah, this one, the back colors, I'm not even sure why it's here. I might have just grabbed it. I might have grabbed it by mistake when I was uploading these.
I notice you've got a mod form back colors and a mod back color forms.
Yep. I have no idea. Like I say, I think I did it last month, and I probably grabbed these by,
Excuse me.
Cast too wide a loop when I was bringing this stuff up. But I won't delete it until I know for sure. So I
Sure.
think I'm ready to turn off the recording. Is any other comments or questions?
I've got a comment for after you've turned off the recording.
Okie doke. Well, we'll stop it.